Okay.
Yeah, now's good now, if we can start.
Yeah, of course.
All right. So, just as a first question, I just want you to introduce yourself. So, like, who you are and what is your position on the development of Overwatch?
Of course. My name is Jeff Kaplan, and I am the game director on Overwatch.
All right. So how did the idea of Overwatch come into fruition?
So Overwatch was a really fun game for us to come up with. We were previously working on a different game, and that game was called Project Titan. And Project Titan had been in development for a number of years, and the development sort of ran out of steam at a certain point, and we were given an opportunity to come up with a new game idea. And a lot of us were huge fans of shooters. We had sort of grown up playing a lot of shooters, and in particular, we loved the 90s action shooters, like Quake comes to mind, and there was all sorts of Quake mods like Team Fortress. And we were really inspired by games like that. And at the same time, we were also playing a lot of MOBA games like League of Legends and Dota 2 and Dota and Heroes of the Storm. And we really liked that genre as well. And we sort of had this vision for melding the great 90s action shooter with the MOBA concept. And that's how Overwatch really came about.
All right, cool. So what was your goal when it came to the creation of Overwatch? Like, what guidelines did you set during the development of Overwatch?
We wanted to make a game that was fun first and foremost. And I know that sounds like kind of an obvious, straightforward answer, but we really wanted to make something fun. We wanted to make something that we couldn't stop playing ourselves, that we wanted to go home every night and play the game on our lunch break. First thing in the morning, we wanted to play this game. So that was like the primary goal. Second from that is we wanted to make the shooter genre accessible to more people. We felt like we loved playing shooter games, and we believed that there were way more people who would also love playing shooter games if somebody sort of thought about the genre from their standpoint. And so we wanted to be more inclusive with the game. So that was another goal. And then we really just wanted to make like a best-in-class, action-based 6v6 team shooter, and I think we did that.
All right, cool. Did you always know at the beginning of development that Overwatch was going to be a very competitive game?
We always had a belief that we were going to make the game competitive first and foremost. And what I mean by that more than anything was that we put the focus of Overwatch in the team winning or losing. And we didn't focus on individual performance.
Right.
And that's not necessarily like a good thing or a bad thing. That's just a design decision. All design decisions are trade-offs at some point. And the design decision to make Overwatch focus more on the victory or defeat did a lot to make the game more competitive. It also really reinforced the concept of team play, and obviously it comes with some drawbacks too. It makes the game kind of a little bit harsh for people who don't like losing, and then they tend to blame it on their teammates.
Right.
So there were advantages and disadvantages, but it did make the game very, very competitive.
All right. So as Overwatch grew, did you ever decide to change some original development guidelines to better suit the competitive side of Overwatch?
We did make some decisions to make the game more competitive. I'm trying to think of some specific examples. The first iteration of our competitive mode came into play in the beta. It wasn't there. It wasn't. In fact, we didn't have competitive mode in the game when the game launched. If you remember, it was our
Right.
first large content update that added competitive mode. And that's because our competitive audience felt that the competitive mode we had in the beta was not competitive enough. And they felt like it was a little bit grindy. And in hindsight, I don't know if we made the right decision there. I think the problem was that the beta reacted instantly to an early version of comp that wasn't complete. And I
Right.
think with some iteration and refinement, that system would have been less grindy and would have had the competitive element that they were seeking, and maybe was a better design than what we ultimately ended up with. Only time will really tell on that. But I think there were a lot of good ideas that were perceived as less competitive in the first version of our competitive mode play, that were later, sort of frowned upon. So I don't know. I think that's an example of like a sacrifice we made to make the game more competitive.
All right. So when was the idea for the Overwatch League conceived?
Overwatch League was conceived at a breakfast in Germany, in Cologne, Germany, that Nate Nanzer, who is the commissioner of Overwatch League, and myself, just sort of happenstance ended up at the same table. We were basically both in Germany for Gamescom, and this was in 2015. And we were there for different reasons. I was showing Overwatch for the first time to the European audience, and Nate was actually on like a marketing research worldwide tour. He had just flown in from China to Germany, and we ended up at the same hotel, because Blizzard was hosting everybody there. And it was sort of like a buffet breakfast. And Nate's like, "Oh, is anybody sitting with you?" I'm like, "No, no, no, sit down." And Nate and I started talking about what we loved and didn't love about esports. And we started also like Nate and I really bonded over that breakfast, and we realized that both of us were professional sports fans in real life. And Nate had actually played amateur baseball and collegiate baseball, and he's a huge soccer fan or European football fan, and I'm a big NHL fan. So we started sharing stories about what each of us loved about professional sports, and also what we loved about esports. But then also we were kind of being critical of esports too. We're like, so much of it feels very amateur and very ad hoc and unprofessional. Why isn't esports following more of a direction of pro sports? And so that breakfast happened. That was like the inception of the idea. And then a few months later, Nate, along with some of our esports folks like Trevor Houston, came to me and Team 4, which is the Overwatch team, and basically pitched like, "Well, what if we did this for the Overwatch esport? Instead of doing what we traditionally do, why don't we do a league, and why don't we have it be regional based?" And there was all these ideas that we thought were just killers. So that's how this whole thing sort of came to be.
All right. So what steps have you taken to make Overwatch better suited for Overwatch League?
We took a lot of steps to make Overwatch better for Overwatch League. We put a tremendous effort last year into making the game more watchable. We added an automatic third-person observer cam that follows the action, so it makes it easier for our observers to catch a really great broadcast angle. We added significant numbers of features for our observer team. The observer team is equivalent of the camera people, at a live sporting event. Like at a
Right.
live sporting event, you might have like 20 people manning the cameras. And in the Overwatch League, we call those observers. And so we added a lot of features for them. We added a replay feature that allows them to have a cool moment happen, go back and play it time scaled from all sorts of cool angles. So on the broadcast, they can show like a really cool, like, Zenyatta headshot kill that Jonak gets, from 30 meters out. Like you get to see that moment play out. We spent a tremendous amount of time making a team coloring system and iterating on team colors, so that way the teams would all have uniforms, and that way all of the interface would be team colored. And we did home and away teams for every single of the 12 teams that were in Overwatch League in Season 1. So that way you could tell, are you watching the Florida Mayhem versus the Dallas Fuel, and who's home and away? And it's all very clear and trackable. And like if you're a Florida Mayhem fan, you're always rooting for the yellow team if they're at home, and you're always rooting for the white team if they're away. And it all just kind of makes sense and made the game visually easier to follow. And that wasn't just a matter of like doing the UI and the skins for the team, but we also had to team color every single effect in the game. So every single bullet tracer that would fire off, every explosion, maze, ice wall, everything had to be looked at from a visual effects standpoint as well. So those are just some of the things we did. We also added viewership incentives for Twitch, for viewing on Twitch, so you can unlock tokens to buy skins. We did all sorts of support. We added a web-based stat system for the broadcast team. So they have a live statistician who's pulling stats using a web interface for the matches and feeding into the broadcast. And so the list goes on and on from there. A lot of administrative stuff as well.
All right. So how surprised were you at the overall popularity of the Overwatch League?
I think we were incredibly surprised and pleased with the reception that the Overwatch League received. We had a ton of viewers. We had more viewers than I think anybody was really expecting. The viewership stayed amazingly strong through the entire season. And I think kind of the culmination that a lot of us were just so beside ourselves at was the finals at the Barclays Center in New York City, in Brooklyn, where the finals literally sold out. Both days sold out almost instantly, which was amazing. And then, a lot of us traveled to New York. I was in New York for the finals and in the Barclays Center, and there wasn't an open seat. And every single person there was so into the match and just loved every single minute of it. It just sort of warmed our heart how amazing the reception was and how high quality the broadcast ended up, and that people were really resonating with the league. It was pretty awesome.
All right. So has the feedback from Overwatch League professionals affected some decisions and changes in the game?
Yeah, we get a lot of feedback from the Overwatch League professionals. They have a lot of avenues to contact us. Many of them have, we have player managers who work for Blizzard that are always in contact with the players. So they know if at any point they have feedback that they want to get to the development team, that they can. Many of them personally have my email address. We also did a tour of the Blizzard Arena, which is where all of the teams practice. They all have practice rooms there, where Scott Mercer and Jeff Goodman, who are two of our top designers on Overwatch, went for the entire day and individually met with each team to get their feedback on the state of the game. So that was really, really useful for us as well. We're also in a Discord channel with the Overwatch League pros, and they can, in the Discord channel, they can let us know, their thoughts on the game, and they're oftentimes pretty vocal about their feedback about the game, the format of the league, all things related. Like, they'll comment on the balance of Brigitte, and they'll comment on, like, if there's too much air conditioning in the arena and they think it's too cold. So the pros are very good and very vocal about giving feedback, and we're constantly receiving it in lots of different ways.
All right, so final question would be, do you believe that the Overwatch League and many other esports leagues will become as popular, if not more, than modern sports leagues such as the NFL or the NBA?
I think our wish is to establish the league and make it so high quality that it has a chance to have the persistence of something like the NFL. Obviously, there's a technology element coupled with any esport where traditional sports are a little bit independent of that technology curve. We would love to enjoy a run like any of the current pro sports leagues. And I think if you look at the current generation that's growing up right now and their interest in pro sports versus their interest in computer gaming or console gaming or mobile gaming is so much higher than their interest in pro sports that esports stands a really good chance of sort of creating a foundation and creating a tradition like things like the NFL have gotten to enjoy over the time. But we want to be humble. We know that there's a long way for us to go. We're moving into season 2,
Right.
and we just want to build on the success that we've already built and try to make season 2 better than season 1. We're really stoked. We have 8 more teams joining the league, so that'll bring us up to 20 teams. It's really interesting to note also that many of the team owners of the Overwatch League teams own professional sports teams outside in other leagues. And I think that's a real huge vote of confidence that these people who do sports for a living see Overwatch League as sort of the future, that they're investing in it, and that it's something that they really believe in. So I think that speaks really highly for the direction of the league and esports in general.
All right. Yeah. Those are all my questions.
Awesome.
All right.
Well, you did a great job. You could be like a game journalist.
That'd be cool. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this is awesome. I was flattered to be asked to be a part of this, and I hope it was helpful to you and your project.
Yeah, it was. I was actually flattered that you answered. It's really helpful. It's great that you came on to answer my questions.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, great news. Well, just let contact Steven if there's any issues or if there's any follow-up that you have, and we're happy to help out in any way we can.
All right. Thank you so much.
Okay. Take care, Alan.
All right. See ya.
Okay. See you later.